Air New Zealand Limited is the national airline of New Zealand. Based in Auckland, the airline operates scheduled passenger flights to 22 domestic and 29 international destinations in 16 countries around the Pacific Rim and the United Kingdom. The airline has been a member of the Star Alliance since 1999. Air New Zealand originated in 1940 as Tasman Empire Airways Limited, a company operating trans-Tasman flights between New Zealand and Australia. Teal became wholly owned by the New Zealand government in 1965, whereupon it was renamed Air New Zealand. The airline served international routes until 1978, when the government merged it and the domestic New Zealand National Airways Corporation into a single airline under the Air New Zealand name. Air New Zealand was privatised in 1989, but returned to majority government ownership in 2001 after near bankruptcy due to the failed tie-up with Australian carrier Ansett Australia. In the 2015 financial year to June, Air New Zealand carried 14.29 million passengers. Air New Zealand's route network focuses on Australasia and the South Pacific, with long-haul services to Eastern Asia, the Americas and the United Kingdom. It was the last airline to circumnavigate the world with flights to Heathrow via both Los Angeles and via Hong Kong. The latter ended in March 2013 when Air New Zealand stopped Hong Kong-London flights in favor of a code-sharing deal with Cathay Pacific. The airline's main hub is Auckland Airport, located near Mangere in the southern part of the Auckland urban area. Air New Zealand is headquartered in a building called The Hub, located 20 kilometers from Auckland Airport, in Auckland's Wynyard Quarter. Air New Zealand currently operates an international long-haul fleet consisting of Boeing 777 family, Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner, and Boeing 767-300 aircraft. Airbus A320 aircraft operate on routes to Australia and the Pacific Islands, and on domestic routes. Air New Zealand's regional subsidiaries, Air Nelson, Eagle Airways, and Mount Cook Airline, operate additional domestic services using turboprop aircraft. Air New Zealand was awarded Airline of the Year in 2010 and 2012 by the Air Transport World Global Airline Awards. In 2014, Air New Zealand was ranked the safest airline in the world by JACDEC. History. Air New Zealand began as Teal in 1940, operating short Empire flying boats on trans-Tasman routes. Following World War II, Teal operated weekly flights from Auckland to Sydney, and added Wellington and Fiji to its routings. The New Zealand and Australian governments purchased 50% stakes in Teal in 1953, and the airline ended flying boat operations in favour of land-based turboprop airliners by 1960. In 1965, Teal became Air New Zealand, the New Zealand government having purchased Australia's 50% stake in the carrier. With the increased range of the Douglas DC-8S, the airline's first jet aircraft, Air New Zealand began trans-Pacific services to the United States and Asia, with Los Angeles and Honolulu added as destinations in 1965. The airline further acquired wide-body McDonnell Douglas DC-10 airliners in 1973. The DC-10s introduced the new Koru-inspired logo for the airline, which remains to this day. In 1978, the domestic airline National Airways Corporation and its subsidiary Safair were merged into Air New Zealand to form a single national airline. further expanding the carrier's operations. As a result, NAC's Boeing 737 and Fokker F-27 aircraft joined Air New Zealand's fleet alongside its DC-8 and DC-10 airliners. The merger also resulted in the airline having two IATA airline designators, TE from Air New Zealand and NZ from NAC. TE continued to be used for international flights and NZ for domestic flights until 1990, when international flights assumed the NZ code. In 1981, Air New Zealand introduced its first Boeing 747 airliner, and a year later initiated service to London via Los Angeles. The 747-200s owned by Air New Zealand were all named after ancestral Maori canoes. 1985 saw the introduction of Boeing 767-200 airliners to fill the large size gap between the Boeing 737 and 747. In 1989, the airline was privatized with a sale to a consortium headed by Brierley Investments Limited. The New Zealand air transport market underwent deregulation in 1990, prompting Air New Zealand to acquire a 50% stake in Ansett Australia in 1995. In March 1999, Air New Zealand became a member of the Star Alliance. From 1999 through 2000, Air New Zealand became embroiled in an ownership battle over Ansett with co-owner News Limited over a possible sale of the underperforming carrier to Singapore Airlines. Merger with Ansett in 2000. Air New Zealand announced that it had chosen instead to acquire the entirety of Ansett Australia for $680 million from News Corporation Limited. Business commentators believe this to have been a critical mistake, as Ansett's fleet, staffing levels and infrastructure far outweighed that of Air NZ. Subsequently, both carriers' profitability came under question, and foreign offers to purchase the Air New Zealand group were considered. In September 2001, plagued by costs it could not possibly afford, the Air New Zealand Ansett group neared collapse. A failed attempt at purchasing Virgin Blue was the final straw, and on the 12th of September, out of both time and cash, Air New Zealand placed Ansett Australia into voluntary administration, following which Ansett was forced to cease operations. Air New Zealand announced a $1.425 billion operating loss. 21st century. In October 2001, Air New Zealand was renationalised under a New Zealand government $885 million rescue plan, and subsequently received new leadership. This act was the only thing that spared Air New Zealand from also going into administration, without which it too would have joined its now bankrupt subsidiary, Ansett, and likely would have been grounded. In 2002, Air New Zealand reconfigured its domestic operations under a low-cost airline business plan, and the New Zealand government weighed a proposal from Qantas to purchase a 1/5 stake in the carrier. Air New Zealand returned to profitability in 2003, reporting a net profit of $165.7 million for that year. The carrier saw increasing profits through 2004 and 2005. In 2004, the airline announced a comprehensive relaunch of its long-haul product, featuring the introduction of new seats in its business, premium economy, and economy class cabins. In 2003, Air New Zealand added the Airbus A320 airliner to its fleet for use on short-haul international flights. In 2005, the airline received its first Boeing 777 aircraft, and placed orders for the Boeing 787 in 2004. The airline later was announced as the launch customer for the -9 variant of the 787. On the 21st of December 2010, the New Zealand government approved an alliance between Air New Zealand and Australian airline Virgin Blue, which allows both airlines to expand operations between Australia and New Zealand with codeshares for trans-Tasman and connecting domestic flights, reciprocal access to lounges and frequent flyer programs. Air New Zealand subsequently purchased a 26% shareholding in Virgin Australia Holdings to cement the relationship. It is understood to be a long-term holding, with Air New Zealand saying that at present it does not wish to own more. In 2011, Air New Zealand introduced the Boeing 777-300 airliner, as well as the economy Skycoach, a set of 3 economy-class seats that could be converted into a flat multi-purpose surface by raising the leg rests. After a 4-year delay, Air New Zealand took delivery of its first Boeing 787-9 on the 9th of July 2014. On the 12th of September 2014, the airline withdrew the Boeing 747 after 33 years of service, leaving Air New Zealand with a completely twin-engine jet fleet. In November 2013, the government reduced its share in Air New Zealand from 73% to 53% as part of its controversial asset sales program. It made $365 million from this deal. Corporate Affairs and Identity. Head Office. The Air New Zealand head office, the hub, is a 15,600 square meters office park located at the corner of Beaumont and Fanshawe Streets in the Western Reclamation Precinct 2, Auckland City. It includes 2 connected 6-level buildings. The facility consists of a lot of glass to allow sunlight and therefore reduce electricity consumption. The building does not have cubicle walls. Lights automatically turn on at 7:30 a.m. and turn off at 6 p.m. Sensors throughout the building can turn on lights if they detect human activity, and turn off lights if human activity is not detected for 15 minutes. The building cost $60 million New Zealand dollars to build and develop. From late September to early October 2006, the airline moved 1,000 employees from 4 buildings in the Auckland CBD and some other buildings. The company previously had its head office in the Key Tower in the CBD. In its history, the airline had its head office in Airways House on Customs Street East. Subsidiaries. Operations subsidiaries. The following are operations subsidiaries of Air New Zealand Limited. Air New Zealand Cargo. Air New Zealand has 4 wholly owned subsidiary airlines. There are 3 fully integrated regional airlines: Air Nelson, Eagle Airways and Mount Cook Airline, which serve secondary destinations in New Zealand. Together they make up Air New Zealand Link. Air Nelson is based in Nelson, operating Bombardier Q300s. Flight numbers are in the NZ8000 series. Eagle Airways is based in Hamilton, operating Beechcraft 1900D aircraft. Flight numbers are in the NZ2000 series. Mount Cook Airline is based in Christchurch, operating ATR-72 to 500 and ATR-72 to 600 turboprop aircraft. Flight numbers are in the NZ5000 series. Zeal 320 was introduced to help combat increasing labor costs. Zeal 320 operated Air New Zealand's trans-Tasman fleet of Airbus A320-200 aircraft under the Air New Zealand brand. On the 31st of July 2006, flights were renumbered to the NZ7 NZ700-999 series for trans-Tasman services, and NZ1000 series for domestic services. All of Air New Zealand's A322-100s were registered to Zeal-320 until the 26th of November 2008, when ownership of the fleet was transferred back to Air New Zealand. However, staff that worked the A320-200 fleet were still employed by this subsidiary. This has been a bone of contention within the airline group, in which these employees are paid at a lower scale than the mainline counterparts. Continued industrial action by staff employed in this subsidiary during 2009 permanently delayed a proposed LCC airline as a successor to Freedom Air that would have also employed the Airbus A320 on domestic routes to counter Jetstar Airways, also operating in New Zealand. As of mid-2014, a non-operations company named Zeal-320 is registered as active with the New Zealand Companies Office, but this entity does not employ any crew. Technical subsidiaries. The following are technical operations subsidiaries of Air New Zealand. In June 2015, Air New Zealand confirmed the sale of its Safe Air Engineering subsidiary to the Australian arm of Airbus Group. Awards sponsorships. Air New Zealand was the title sponsor of the Air New Zealand Cup domestic rugby club competition through the 2009 season. The airline remains a major sponsor of New Zealand rugby, including the country's national team, the All Blacks. The airline also sponsors the Air New Zealand Wine Awards, World of Wearable Arts, and partners with New Zealand's Department of Conservation and Antarctica. New Zealand brand and livery. Brand. On the 27th of March 2006, Air New Zealand embarked on a changeover to a new brand identity, involving a new Zambezi-designed uniform, new logo, new color scheme and new look check-in counters and lounges. The new uniforms feature a color palette mirroring the greenstone, teal, schist and slate hues of New Zealand. Sea and sky fabric woven from merino wool, and curves inspired by the Koru. A greenstone color replaces the blue Pacific Wave color, inspired by the color of the Punamu, the prized gemstone found in New Zealand. The Air New Zealand Koru was woven through all Air New Zealand signage and products. Later in 2009, staff were involved in testing fabrics and cuts of uniforms. It would be fair to say that the lessons from the development and introduction of the current uniform have been taken on board, said Mr. Fife after widespread public and staff criticism. Livery history. The Air New Zealand symbol is a Maori koru. It is a stylized representation of a fern frond unfolding, and signifies new life, growth and renewal. The koru was used on the prows of the early Polynesian canoes that sailed the Pacific with its many islands. The koru was first applied to the tail of Air New Zealand aircraft with the arrival of the DC-10 in 1973, and has remained ever since. The current aircraft livery was adopted in 1996. The koru also appears on the Air New Zealand house flag and flies at international airports such as Los Angeles Airport. A redesigned logo was unveiled on the 21st of March 2006. The new logo has been introduced in all advertising, signage and stationery and on planes. The Pacific Wave fuselage stripes were removed from short-haul aircraft in 2009, simplifying the overall livery, and was in the process of also being removed from long-haul aircraft before the logo change. A rebranding was announced in July 2012. ditching the teal and green colors that have represented the airline since its early beginnings as Tasman Empire Airways in 1939. They instead moved to a black color in a joint effort between Air New Zealand, New Zealand design agency Designworks and renowned Kiwi typographer Chris Sowersby, as well as a new logo typeface. The tails of the aircraft and the typeface will be black, while the rest of the fuselage will remain white, and the engine nacelles will be in silver. The Koru will be moved to the right of the words, as it was originally. Then CEO Rob Fyfe had this to say about the rebranding: "Black has resonated well with our customers and staff who identify with it as the color of New Zealand and a natural choice for our national airline. It inspires pride, is part of our Kiwi identity and a symbol of Kiwi success on the world stage." The airline began using black as a corporate color ahead of the sponsorship campaign with NZ's rugby union team, the All Blacks, last year. But right after the first few aircraft were painted in the scheme, another new livery was announced on the 12th of June 2013. In conjunction with a $20 million Memorandum of Understanding with the National Tourism Agency Tourism New Zealand for joint marketing, TNZ granted permission for Air New Zealand to use the New Zealand fern mark, a standard fern logo used and managed by Tourism NZ and NZ Trade and Enterprise for international promotion. In the livery, two new liveries were unveiled. The first is predominantly white with a black strip running downwards on the rear fuselage from the tail, adorned with the Koru logo in white, to disappear downwards just before where the wings meet the body of the plane. The black and white fern mark adorns the fuselage. This livery is used on most of the fleet. A select number have an all-black livery with the fern in silver, including the airline's first Boeing 787-9. Extensive consumer surveys by Air New Zealand revealed 78% people believe the fern mark fits with the airline's brand and represents New Zealand. The first aircraft to be painted in this livery was rolled out on the 24th of September 2013. Special liveries in 1973. The first McDonnell Douglas DC-1030s arrived with 1974 British Commonwealth Games NZ-74 logo on both sides of the forward fuselage beneath the cabin windows. In 1984, pictures of the Buckingham Palace Horse Guards with "London, Here We Come" were placed on the side of the hump of the airline's new Boeing 747-200Bs when Air New Zealand was allowed to fly the Los Angeles-London leg of the Trans-Pacific route in its own name. Prior to this, British Airways had operated Air New Zealand's aircraft over the US in order to work around a "no pick-up and continue" regulation. British Airways was exempt from this regulation. A special livery on 747-400 and BW featuring an image of the All Blacks front row of Carl Hoeft, Anton Oliver and Kees Meeuws was used on the aircraft that took them to the 1999 Rugby World Cup. ZKNBW also had a black tail. Two other aircraft were painted in the special All Blacks scheme: 737-200 QC ZKN-QC and Sub 340 ZKN-SK. Both these aircraft retained the blue-teal tail colors. In 1999, one Boeing 737-300 ZK-NA was painted in a new Millennium livery depicting celebrations and the America's Cup regatta that was to be held in 2000. In 2002 and 2003, Air New Zealand marked its position as the official airline to Middle-earth by decorating 3 planes with the Lord of the Rings imagery applied as giant decals. The decal material was described in airline publicity as being as thin as cling film and weighing more than 60 kilograms. The imagery featured actors from the film trilogy The Lord of the Rings against backdrops of New Zealand locations used in the films. August 2005 to March 2008 saw Freedom Air paint Airbus A320-200 ZK-OJL and ZK-OJO in a mural promoting Warner Brothers Movie World on the Gold Coast. This was part of the Art in the Sky competition won by Che Ridland. All the major Looney Tunes characters were depicted. In 2008, ZKFRE was painted into a lime green Air New Zealand Holidays livery. As of July 2009, the aircraft was removed from Air New Zealand service and sold to Webjet Liners Aéreas. During 2011 and 2012, 6 aircraft have been painted in an all-blacks-inspired livery. The planes are completely black, with a silver fern motif covering the aft section of the fuselage. The 6 aircraft include Airbus A320 ZKOAB and Boeing 777-300 ZKOKQ in the main Air New Zealand fleet, plus ATR 72-600 ZK MVA operated by Air New Zealand Link subsidiary Mount Cook Airline. Beechcraft 190OD ZKAG and ZKAK operated by subsidiary Eagle Airways have also been repainted in the black and silver livery. In November 2012, Boeing 777-300 ZKOKP was repainted in the new black-tail livery and fitted with a 830 square meters decal promoting the premiere and release of the first film in the Hobbit trilogy. The decal took 6 days and 400 man-hours to install. In December 2013, ahead of the premiere of the second part of the Hobbit trilogy, The Desolation of Smaug, Air New Zealand applied 2 54-meter-long images of the dragon Smaug on the sides of Boeing 777-300 ZKOKO. Destinations. Air New Zealand and its subsidiaries serves 21 domestic destinations and 30 international destinations in 16 countries and territories across Asia, Europe, North America, South America and Oceania. Air New Zealand serves only 5 of the domestic destinations. Subsidiaries serve the remaining 17 destinations. Air New Zealand operates 5 fifth Freedom routes, the most notable being the daily Los Angeles-London Heathrow service, operating as an extension of one of its Auckland-Los Angeles services. The airline operates weekly flights from Rarotonga to Sydney and Los Angeles, in addition to flights connecting via Auckland. In 2012, after securing a contract from the Australian government, Air New Zealand launched twice-weekly services from Sydney and Brisbane to Norfolk Island on its A320 aircraft, complementing its existing direct services from Auckland. The airline also serves 8 summer charter destinations in Japan from Auckland. In November 2015, the airline announced a new seasonal route to Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam to commence in June 2016. The route will operate 3 times a week during the southern winter using the Boeing 767-300. In April 2016, Air New Zealand announced a new route to Manila in the Philippines, to commence in December 2016. The route will operate 3 times a week using the Boeing 767-300. Code-share agreements. Air New Zealand has code-share agreements with the following airlines. Fleet. Air New Zealand's main fleet consists of Boeing jet aircraft for long-haul flights, and predominantly Airbus aircraft for domestic and short-haul international flights. Air New Zealand's subsidiaries operate various makes of turboprop aircraft. The majority of the airline's main fleet is made up of short-haul Airbus A320-200 aircraft. 16 domestic configuration A320s are used on domestic routes between the major airports, while 13 international configuration A320s are used on short-haul international routes to Australia and the Pacific Islands. The international long-haul fleet consists of Boeing 767-300, Boeing 777-200, Boeing 777-300 and Boeing 787-9 jet aircraft. The 4 Boeing 767 and 6 Boeing 787 primarily serve Asian Pacific destinations, including Perth, Southeast Asia, mainland China, Japan and Hawaii, as well as on some short-haul routes to Australia and the Pacific Islands. The 767 is occasionally used on domestic routes to cater for major events. In 2008, all 767s were retrofitted with winglets to increase fuel economy. The 15 Boeing 777 aircraft primarily serve continental United States, Vancouver, Buenos Aires, London, and Hong Kong, as well as some Australian and Pacific Island destinations. For regional domestic services, 3 makes of turboprop aircraft are used, each make belonging to a single subsidiary. Mount Cook Airline operates 11 ATR-72-500 and 13 ATR-72-600 aircraft between major cities and towns. The 23 Air Nelson-operated Bombardier Q300 operate other routes alongside Mount Cook Airline, including to some smaller centers. Eagle Airways Beechcraft 190D operate on minor routes between smaller urban areas and the main hub airports. These are being progressively phased out and the routes either being abandoned or being taken over by larger aircraft. The Boeing customer code for Air New Zealand is 19, which was inherited from the National Airways Corporation on its merger with Air New Zealand in 1978. This means a Boeing 777-200 built for Air New Zealand is designated a 777-219. Current fleet Air New Zealand and its subsidiaries currently operate a total of 105 aircraft, which includes 26 aircraft by Mount Cook Airline, 23 by Air Nelson and 2 by Eagle Airways. Fleet plans. At the start of June 2014, Air New Zealand announced it would be placing a $1.6 billion order with Airbus for 13 Airbus A320neo and A321neo aircraft. The aircraft will be introduced from 2017 to replace the airline's older short-haul international Airbus A320s. There will be at least 3 A321neo aircraft, which will have a 2-class configuration compared to the A320neo and existing A320s, which have all economy configurations. The order also included an extra A320ceo aircraft for the domestic fleet. Air New Zealand, in 2004, ordered 8 Boeing 787-9s as the launch customer for the 787-9 model, with options on 8 more. These were originally intended to be delivered beginning in late 2010, but significant development delays in the base 787-8 model pushed delivery on the 787-9 out to mid-2014. The first aircraft was handed over to Air New Zealand on 8 July 2014 at the Everett plant, and arrived in Auckland 3 days later. In February 2013, Air New Zealand exercised 2 options to bring the order to 10, and later on 8 December 2014, exercised 2 more to bring the order to 12. The last 787-9 is expected to be delivered in late 2018. The 787-9 will replace the Boeing 767-300ERs. With the fleet renewal, Air New Zealand plans to simplify its jet fleet to 3 aircraft families. The Airbus A320 family operating short-haul domestic and international routes, and Boeing 777 and Boeing 787 on long-haul international routes. Historic feat in the past, Air New Zealand and its subsidiaries have flown the following aircraft. It does not include aircraft solely operated by Teal and NAC, or aircraft operated solely by Air New Zealand Link subsidiaries. Totals do not include current operating aircraft.